Hey, Dad. How are you?
I'm doing well.
This is a videotape.
Oh,
I just came down to visit. I drove in from LA to visit my dad here. Just for a little bit before I fly to New York tonight.
tonight you're going to New York?
Tonight I'm going to New York City, and then I'll be back after like 10 days, and I'll spend a little more time here.
What do you do in New York?
I'm taking classes at Columbia, and I'm also going to TA a class at Columbia.
Wow.
So I'm excited about that. And so I'll come back though after maybe 10 days, and we'll hang out and play some tennis and all that kind of stuff.
So you're
But
a teacher.
I'm a teacher. Yeah, I'm a teacher. I've taught high school, college, and I'm in a doctorate program at Columbia University in New York
Cool.
City. Yeah.
How much time do you have to go?
I go there for about 1 week or 10 days every term, meaning every semester. And now this is the fall semester, and I have a course.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a class on transforming conflict from within. That's the course.
Transforming
Conflict from within. Yeah. The idea being that when you do a little meditation and mindfulness and bring wisdom in, you don't have as much conflict with people at work,
Oh.
with whoever you're upset at. So, speaking of conflict, your dad had a certain career, and do you remember what his job was?
Yes, he was with Radio for Europe.
Radio for Europe. And then what Stuart Hannon was his name. What did he do for Radio for Europe?
Wasn't he program director?
Yeah, program director and sometimes assistant to the program director. And do you have memories of him, when you lived in Berkeley in Connecticut?
Yeah. We lived at 139 Parkside Drive.
Yeah, that's right, in Berkeley. And do you have any memories of things like when he would come home to 139 Parkside Drive or to Reading, and pay a visit to the family?
Yeah, he was always on assignment somewhere, always gone. But he did come home. And at one point, I remember when he came home, we didn't even know who he was.
Right. What was that like? What was that experience like? He came back, and tell me that story.
And I think we ran up and threw our arms around the cab driver, thinking he was our dad. We didn't know.
And why was it that you didn't know who he was? Why was it that you were so
He was
unfamiliar?
gone a lot.
Yeah. What was he doing when he was gone?
Job overseas, I guess.
Yeah, job overseas related to Radio
Radio for Europe.
Radio for Europe. And do you remember anything about what they did? What was the job of Radio for Europe? Like their job or mission was?
It was to broadcast to the Iron Curtain countries.
Yeah. And what kinds of things would they broadcast to those countries?
I don't know.
Yeah, they broadcast through to these Eastern European countries, right? Because one country wouldn't allow them to get news. Do you remember who it was?
Russia?
Yeah, Russia or the Soviets didn't want them to get news in from the West. So in that way, you could say that the Soviets were a threat to them, right? And that you could say that the Soviets were a little bit had designs on Eastern Europe, and they wanted to keep them from being a part of Western Europe.
Yeah.
They were kind of, there's a term called the New Soviet Offensive, and it's
And they controlled Eastern Germany.
yeah, they called exactly Eastern Germany, which could you say more about that? Like, could you tell me a little bit more about that? How they controlled Eastern Germany?
Well, with radio broadcasts, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, the biggest city that they also controlled within Germany,
Berlin?
Berlin. They controlled what part of Berlin?
East Berlin?
The eastern part of Berlin, exactly. And so it was a really interesting time. And your dad, my grandfather, was someone in charge of getting news into those Eastern European countries. And he would travel and he would speak. Where would he speak?
I guess he gave speeches everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah. Do you remember anything about him speaking at the Commonwealth Club? Does
Yes.
that ring a bell? Yeah, like a Commonwealth Club in San Francisco? Yeah. Well, it turns out that if you go online and you put in Stuart Hannon and you put in the Commonwealth Club, that there is a site that comes up, and it is the archives of the Commonwealth Club have put one of his talks on the internet.
Really?
And so, they had these archives, and they put them on the internet. And of course, the internet is such that you can go and you can click on something, and you could hear that broadcast. And so,
You can pull up his speeches.
yeah, you can actually pull up his speeches, and I'm trying to get it to play right now. Here it is.
Members of the Commonwealth Club of California, next Thursday, not Friday, but Thursday, we will have the 3rd annual Pacific Festival Luncheon in the Rose Room of this hotel.
And it's only audio, okay? So there's no video.
As to the speaker for that occasion, instead of having the Lieutenant Governor of Hawaii, we will have the Governor of Hawaii, Honorable William F. Quinn. Those of you who have heard Governor Quinn know that he is a forceful and colorful speaker who will do justice to this occasion. He will speak on the topic, Look West, America. Now, in addition to an outstanding speaker, we will have other special features for that occasion. It will be a ladies' day. And it says here we will have a Hawaiian orchestra and singers, a famous marimba band, paraded
Now this is
colors of
1960.
all nations by the Boy Scouts of America,
Yeah.
and last but not least, glamorous Pacific princesses from the Pacific nations. It will be a ticket luncheon. You will need to get tickets in advance. Are going fast. So now, if you don't bring your wife to this most unusual affair, and if she finds out later what a party it was, we will not be responsible for the consequences. There will be no luncheon on Friday, 1 week from today. Which
Now,
is
Dad,
a
you haven't
holiday.
heard your dad's voice probably since you saw him many. Okay,
San Francisco,
listen to this.
who had the misfortune to be sent somewhere else. From 1940 to 1943, he was engaged in radio broadcasting work in San Francisco. Thereafter, for some 9 years, he served in the Army and in the Foreign Service, principally in public information posts in England, Luxembourg, Germany, Greece, and Switzerland. He is presently the assistant to the director of Radio Free Europe, which is a non-governmental agency devoted to principally to broadcasting to the satellite countries of Eastern Europe. Our speaker is on the firing line of the battle of ideas, the battle for men's minds between the free world and the communist world. It's a great pleasure to present Mr. Stuart L. Hannon, who will speak on the subject, the new Soviet offensive. Mr. Hannon.
My dad.
Yeah, this is your dad. First time you've heard his voice probably in 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meyer.
That's your dad.
It's a pleasure to be here in San Francisco again, as you can well imagine.
That's him.
I see several former friends and familiar faces here, including, I believe, one of my former bosses, Phil Lasky. I don't know how many of you have seen this dashboard up here. It looks like the panel of a bomber. There are lights and gears of all kinds, and I see that I can lower myself
That's your dad.
in humiliation, or I can raise myself. I can do almost... We have nothing comparable like this in New York. We only have longer lunch hours. A little louder? All right. As I contemplate the subject that I had the temerity to accept as negotiable in 27 minutes flat, and as I see spread out here quite an assembly of men who probably know better than I that this is impossible, I think of the German private who was taken prisoner by the Allies as the war drew to a close. He was a provincial chap who had gone straight from a village into the Wehrmacht, very young, quite well brainwashed by Nazi leadership. And after routine interrogation, he saw on the wall a large map of Europe. He saw Germany, he saw France, and other familiar places, and then he noticed an enormous expanse of green which stretched to the east, clear off the map. And he asked what that signified, and he was told by the Allies, well, that's Russia. And suddenly a very dark alarm spread across his features, and he asked in a rather hushed voice, but did the Führer know this? Well, unfortunately, I can claim no such innocence because I knew the dimensions of my talk when I agreed to it. I don't want to speak to you today like a statistician or a blithely impartial historian, because I can only speak to you as one who has been immersed in this Soviet communist business through diplomacy and propaganda in several countries for a long time. Therefore, I cannot isolate the challenge from our reaction, or can I speak like a disinterested observer. So it's on these terms that I hope you will permit digressions and even a certain partiality for our cause. Last July, speaking before one of those familiar assemblies of obedient vassals in Moscow, the present dictator of the Empire State, which has annexed or occupied 10 sovereign nations since World War II, and split an 11th down the middle, and repeatedly threatened every free nation in Europe with annihilation, launched still another threat to unleash Soviet missiles at the United States if we should interfere in any way with a Western Hemisphere dictatorship only 90 miles from our shore. Thus, the aggressive Communist Manifesto and defensive Monroe Doctrine of the 19th century have been brought face to face in the mid-20th.
Does that sound familiar?
The most remarkable sentence of the Soviet dictator's ukase was the concluding one.
You were 20 years old.
This is a warning, he said, to those
when
who would
he
like
gave
to
this
solve
talk.
International problems by force and not by reason. I think we need only take this statement, or any random catalog of such statements made recently by this dictator, and review it against the background of the past 5, 15, or 40 years, to realize that what is often called a new Soviet offensive is not new at all. Yet there is a little confusion about this. Prime Minister Macmillan expressed it in a rather vague spirit of consternation in his dispatch to Khrushchev after the Paris collapse, when he remarked, "I simply do not understand what is your purpose today." In Washington, simultaneously, Secretary Herter, when asked at a news conference about the motivation for the torrent of abuse from the Soviet, replied that one can only speculate on this, and speculation is difficult because of secrecy. I wonder sometimes if perhaps there's something eccentric or decadent about our system, our people, or civilization. After being threatened, kidnapped, beaten, and brainwashed, shot from the skies repeatedly, stopped even on the high seas, and denigrated before the world with shocking lies and insults,